welcome to Rollwise, the show where we talk about all things tabletop role playing. This week, we're going to be missing Brent. He's out with a little bit of a cold, but Jeff and I are going to be carrying on, and in his spirit, we'll be adding his perspective. Probably not. We'll just wait for him to talk about this stuff a little bit later after we've got some Cyberpunk Red play under our belt. But we've got a little bit of stuff related to RPG news that's kind of interesting. As much as we don't necessarily stray into the D&D world as much as I'd like, but I guess maybe more because it's just so easy to jump into there because there's just so much D&D topics out there. There's actually 2 books that are coming out for D&D that are kind of interesting. And then we're actually going to use today to talk a little bit about Cyberpunk tips that we were able to find online. Since we're going to be playing Cyberpunk Red in our next as our next game online, we thought we'd at least cover some tips. I'm going to be playing 2 games of this, one with these guys and one with our home table probably. So I'll get a much more Cyberpunk Red than I was expecting, and we'll see exactly what resources are out there, what we've found, what tips we like. Besides the general read the rules, that's a really good tip that you should do for any game. So
yeah, make sure you read the rules.
Yeah, for some reason I feel like as I was looking up tips for it, I was like, oh, this tip is just read the rules, regardless of which set you get. The jump start or the quick.
Right.
They have a jump start and easy mode, and then they have the regular rule book. They're like, well, you should read whatever you get, and I'm like, people just jump in there and they're like, I haven't read the rules, but let's just go, man.
It's role playing, man. It's role playing.
I saw there were 3 rules in this game, and the 3 rules were something about
fun.
style over substance, living on the edge. The other one we'll make up later.
Attitude is everything.
That's right. Attitude is everything. Style over substance, live on the edge. Attitude is everything. Those are the only 3 rules you really need. You don't need to worry about how the game actually.
The rest of it's window dressing, Mike.
It's true.
You just have the players chuck dice occasionally. Tell them whether they succeeded or failed. It doesn't matter what scale you're using.
It's true. Hey, you know what? It seems like you should succeed with that roll. That's a really nice roll you have there.
Yeah, that was good.
Could you imagine?
Unfortunately, that next one wasn't quite good enough.
I just don't feel like it succeeded. Man, that would drive me up the fucking wall. I'm not gonna lie. So to talk about the first 2 products related to Dungeons and Dragons is that the first one is Eberron Forge of the Artificer. That comes out August 19th, and it contains the 2024 25. God, now it's just making me mad because I'm looking at the N-Word article. I didn't notice this, but now it's the 2024/2025 edition Artificer with 5.
Everybody does it differently. That's one of the issues I had. They released a product with no branding.
Yeah.
Other than Dungeons and Dragons, and it's 5th edition extended, compatible, light, next. I don't know. It's dumb. Nobody knows what to call it, so everybody makes up something,
their own little thing. It's just ampersand. That's all it is.
So
the actual book itself, the Forge. So the Forge of the Artificer. Of course, it takes place in the world of Eberron. So if you haven't played in the world of Eberron was probably one of my favorite settings that they came up with. Lots of magic, really cool story. It wasn't your typical this is high fantasy. There are castles, kings, and all that stuff. It had a lot of depth to it. Had a lot of different places you could go. Sharn and all that kind of stuff. And we had some pretty wonderful adventures. One of my favorite campaigns that I've ever done took place in Eberron. So it's cool to see it get a little bit of love. And in this one, what they're offering for the book price is that you can play as the Artificer, the ultimate creative class. Now, depending on who you played, have you ever played an Artificer, Jeff? I don't remember.
I think I played one once, but I've played in a lot of parties that have had Artificers. That's usually one of the reasons why I don't play Artificers, is because usually somebody else is jumping up and down, chopping at the bit to play the Artificer.
Yeah, because they're kind of an interesting jack of all trades class. They've got
Yeah,
some interesting, because they've got some spell casting like abilities, some cool like inventions and gadgets and everything like that. And so it's got a really cool toolkit. And every time I've had an artificer in the party, I've always been kind of exasperated because they've done something I didn't expect that was really cool, but also took care of a problem that I thought would be more challenging. So
sure.
that's just good role playing. I can't blame them for it. I just got to be surprised every time. But if you get this book, you get 4 revised artificer subclasses, and you get one new subclass, a cartographer. Ooh, the
Yeah, I don't know
perfect.
about the cartographer. I'd have to read it. It could be cool, but if all you hear is cartographer, I think people start falling asleep.
It's hard to know. It's the class that has it mechanically built in that you don't get lost in the fucking dungeon. That's really probably what it is.
Yeah, that would be good, right? It's impossible to
Who's
get
making the
lost. I have
map?
this very excellent map.
I haven't put a map down on paper, but my character, on the other hand, he has an excellent map. Um, and in addition to the subclasses, you get 5 revised species, 17 backgrounds, 28 fees, new spells, bastions, and magic items, as well as 3 distinct genre-based campaign templates for building fantasy war, political thriller, and pulp adventure campaigns in the world of Ebron.
That's that's interesting, right?
Hmm.
Like it's not just me.
Yeah.
That's actually something interesting to include in the book. Like the other stuff, I expect to have some level of all of that in a
Hmm.
new campaign book. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's good. I mean, honestly, they do that pretty well in some of the books. There was one book that came out that, like, for example, like it was a like some sort of Strahd book or related to Ravenloft or something like that, where it was like, this is
sure.
how you run a horror game, and it gave like a bunch of really good advice in one of the chapters as to how to run horror correctly. Just like
Oh, that's
in
nice.
Cyberpunk Red, they give you some good advice as to how to run a cyberpunk game, because running a game that feels thematically correct can be hard even for experienced people, because you can accidentally include other tropes that aren't necessarily the type that you're looking for. So it's cool that they include that, and honestly, that's probably worth the price of admission for me, is to get some ideas as to how they run their fantasy noir, political thriller, and pulp adventure
Sure.
stuff.
No,
So,
that's neat. And I see that they're adding some new monsters too.
mhm, yep, yeah. I mean, since we don't play a ton of D&D, that's it's like one of those things where it's like the overall advice for that other stuff is more important to me than their
Sure.
monsters and stuff. But that being said, they are putting out another that so they released it, or they were going to release it in or the PAX East. I don't follow this stuff too closely, but I saw this blurb on there. Is that the new Dungeons and Dragons adventure set in Eberron is going to be known as Race for the Crab Temple. It's to be set in Zendrick, and it makes some pre-generated characters. It throws you into this kind of like race for the artifact kind of game, and it's kind of there to highlight the Eberron Forge of the Artificer
Okay.
class and everything like that. So its full description is: your group has been dispatched by Morgrave University to travel to Zendrick and seek out the Crab Temple. It's a race between your expedition and a rival to discover its secrets. Pre-made level 3 characters are provided, featuring rules from the new player's handbook and first looks at options from Eberron Forge of the Artificer. So a nice little, you know, what are those things called? The aperitif, the one bite, food that you
Oh,
get.
the
What is
amuse
that?
bouche.
That's the word. That's the fancy word for that shit. I knew somebody would know it. There's, I thought it was a thing where you just kind of like chomp on something, and that was it.
Yeah, it's like a mouthful. It's not fully an appetizer because you get one swipe at it.
Just one. Just it
Yeah.
better be the
Well,
perfect fucking bite.
it's just meant to, I don't know, titillate the palate, get you ready for more.
Ooh, it sounds so lovely. Titillate my palate. Sounds good. So, all right. So that's just something I thought was interesting. I thought I would share it because, as much as I haven't really played Dungeons and Dragons in the last couple of years, I don't even think we've touched Dungeons and Dragons since.
No,
I mean, once
I
we
haven't.
Yeah, once we got rid of Dungeons and Dragons at our home table, we haven't touched it at all, really. Which is not. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, and if somebody were to say, "Mike, we're gonna go play Dungeons and Dragons. You want to join me?" I'd be like, "Okay, let's go. Let's go sling some spells and swing some swords. Let's do it."
Sure. Yeah. No. It just there are a lot of other games out there, like we've said multiple times,
Yeah.
and we have fun playing a lot of those games. And right now, I would rather support some of these smaller companies than support
Hmm.
Hasbro. Personally,
Yeah.
nothing against anybody. If you love Dungeons and Dragons, play Dungeons and Dragons. I have
Yeah.
certainly logged
Or,
hundreds, if not thousands, of hours.
or DC 20. Don't be afraid to plug that one out. Just kidding. Um, but speaking of,
I'm excited for that DC 20 finally launching, but that's a different episode.
yeah, that is going to be a different episode. We'll play that again. I honestly, if
Yeah,
I looked at Heroic Fantasy, I think DC 20 is going to be my
I,
my game right
I had
now.
a lot of fun playing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know that there's been some changes, as there
Yeah.
always is from alpha to beta to
Hmm.
when they get the final release. But I'm excited to check it
Yeah.
out.
So let's talk about CD Project Red. Sorry, that's Cyberpunk 2077. Let's talk about Cyberpunk Red. Um, mm, I that does trip up my brain just a little bit because I've seen CD Project Red on so much
Right.
stuff that my brain
No,
just
I
kind of
think
like,
that's natural. I wouldn't worry about it. You know,
yeah, okay, we'll just leave that one in. We don't have an editor,
it's
so
easily confused, but we know we're talking about the tabletop role playing game and
yep.
not the video game role playing game.
This one, get it.
Yes.
So yeah, so we just made characters, and I thought it was interesting how quickly you could make characters. And I think reading through the the book, and how you make their characters, I think that there is probably some nuance that is kind of missing from the character creation process. That it's like you don't have to know it up front, but this is one of those games where I feel like there's probably a little bit of trap that happens if you're not aware of how the game works in some ways. So I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about some character creation tips, and this is both for the game master and the players, just so they can get started on the right foot.
Sure.
Especially since when I look at games, it's like if you're only going to get one crack at the game, and you get like a medium crack or a bad crack because like your players feel like they just didn't understand it, so they made bad characters. That could be a little bit tricky.
Sure.
um but at least we can understand it. So I'll let you go first. Did you have any character creation stuff that you saw that was that kind of stood out for you in terms of tips and all that stuff, or
I okay. The first thing I'm going to cheese out a little bit because over and over and over again when I was reading about uh, Cyberpunk Red
Mhm.
was anytime people were talking about characters tracking usage of items and stuff, everybody was like, use the app. The app's really good. You should download the app, put it on your phone. And they're right. I put the phone on my app. I put the app on my phone. It works better that way. And it's really slick. Like, I don't know that it's the absolute best one that I've ever used, but I've used worse apps tied to games.
Mhm.
Much worse.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna give it a solid A in my opinion. I think the way it's streamlined, the only thing is that when you're getting used to it, obviously, I think there's a little bit of like where is information in the app? Like that can
Yes,
be a little bit tricky to find it. But that's
sure.
like, I mean, that's any app where you've just basically sat down and started to fuck around with where stuff is. So that's good. App is a
Yes.
good thing. So
No,
that
the app's a good thing. The other thing is I, going back to the three rules.
mhm,
Like the style over substance. Like your character should have some style that defines them and where they fit in with society. I think the tip that I saw was, you want to look like you belong, like in the group that you're
mhm.
running with, or it's like you're the guy at the sporting event wearing a different team's jersey. If that makes sense.
It does.
You stand out like a
Like
sore thumb. You look like you're a corpo plant, rather than who
Mhm.
you say you are.
Well, and exactly, and I
So
think
you
that's
have to have
something that
that in mind, I think, when you're making the character. Sorry.
yeah, no, and I think it's true, but I think it's not only making the character, I think it's just gameplay in general. It's like since style is such a intrinsic part of your character, how do you think about how your character's presenting themselves in the moment at hand? Like
Yeah.
many D&D characters just kind of like hand wave that, oh, I walk into a tavern and they happen to be wearing a set of full plate armor, their shield is on their back, and they've got
Right.
a backpack and they go, give me an ale, and it's like everyone else is like, farmers or townsfolk that are just like, who the fuck is that guy who comes, like, is he on a crusade? Like, why, like they just, that outward presentation isn't necessarily something people think about, but it's very important because if you come into a nightclub, with all of your guns strapped to your back and you're like, I'm looking for a job, you know.
Trouble's probably going to find you instead, right?
Hmm.
But in terms of, yeah, no, I agree with that totally. But in terms of the character creation,
Hmm.
like trying to fit into like your class and having an idea of
Hmm.
what that person looks like, the person that
Hmm.
you're conceiving, the character that you're conceiving in your head,
Yeah.
uh, I think it goes a long way towards, especially like when you're assigning the stat points and buying the gear, which is all part of character creation.
Hmm.
I liked that the book has, like weapons
Hmm.
for each character that are, slightly different
Hmm.
because it gives them a different flavor.
Yeah.
What was your top tip or top couple of tips for character
Oh,
creation?
man, I got a few
Y-
top
y-
tips that I kind of
okay,
I
well,
kind of have
good.
sussed out so far. And so the first thing is, and this is something because I'm actually reading three books right now, so it's interesting to kind of read them side by side. Since I just got my Coriolis, the Third Horizon book, I'm reading that in anticipation of us running the the icons campaign in our home table. But the
Okay,
first thing that that book does, and I think that Cyberpunk does later, it doesn't necessarily put it first and foremost, is choosing your type of team that you want to play. That team
interesting.
identity is like it's something important, and it is in the book to say like what kind of team are you? Are you a nomad group? Are you mercenaries? Are you executives? Like, are you part of some law enforcement group? Choose that before you start to drill down to your identity as an individual, just so that um is because as a session zero, that's going to kind of lean you towards what kind of jobs you want to take and how you play within the world. Like, do you want to play a trauma team? I mean, you don't have to necessarily everybody be medics in a trauma team, but
No,
like if you want to be that, like, I don't know, that show The Pit, it's really like, oh, let's deal with this high intensity trauma rescue environment thing. I don't know if that's a fun RPG, but just came to mind, I guess. But you could
sure,
create a team that has an executive who's like the administrator of your trauma team. You have the med tech who's actually doing the deal with the trauma. You have your solos that help you get in and out and extractions. And I mean, you could build your team around it, but knowing that first is is kind of helps you identify like, okay, well, what kind of game do I want to play? And I think a lot of other systems have maybe emphasized that more than I found in Cyberpunk Red, because that comes later. It feels like, in at least the main book to me. It might have mentioned it, but sometimes as you're reading rules, and your brain is like, "Oh yeah, you should make your team. Look at this page, 1,000 pages ahead of now." And
right.
sometimes you may gloss over that. And then when you get to the actual creation of your characters, I thought this was something that kind of is really fascinating, and I hadn't really thought about this as I was looking at the characters themselves and the roles. Is that you're creating a character that is a person with flaws and things that they can do
Yeah,
that are good at it. But you kind of are like, okay, well, I chose a role, and when you first look at your role, you think your role is going to be a hugely impactful with how everything is, and it is impactful really in just one way. It's like that's kind of sets your identity and it gives you your role ability. But past that, it really doesn't tell you what skills to take, other than if you do the quick ones. You can make a character that has any role if you use the complete
true.
comprehensive thing, and you can choose whatever you can build it however you want to. It's just that when you're building the quick and dirty versions, they've just suggested for that particular role, these are the types of skills that would fit that
Yeah.
persona and stuff like that. And I think in my mind, I hadn't really um, hadn't really put that together. That it's not really a level based game. Like you're not a fifth level solo or 12th level nomad. You're a
Yeah.
solo or a nomad, and then that's kind of where you start. You get a life path that gives you some experience to draw from and how you should play your character when they encounter certain things, and then conceptually, you have this idea, and you go, okay, well, now I'm just going to apply skills that I feel fit to this, and there you go. But those skills, they're just anybody's skills, right? So don't get
Right.
locked into this idea. Play the type of character that you want to play, and the role is just kind of this kind of extra on top that helps you inform your identity. So
Sure.
I thought
That's a
that
good
was
tip.
kind of a thing that was neat that I hadn't really thought about beforehand. So I thought that's good advice.
It is.
So the one thing I did notice that some people say is that when you do min maxing in uh, Cyberpunk Red, as you can do that. It's not inherently bad. Every system kind of allows for different things. But one thing that people more knowledgeable than I in the system had kind of suggested is that since it's all about choices, it's about holding your characters accountable to those types of choices they do. If you do min max, what are you giving up for your specialty? How does that
Right.
affect their gameplay? How does that expose them to weaknesses that they might have not been exposed to if they chose a more normal character instead of trying to like juice the statistics and everything like that. As a game master, I've never really wanted to punish my characters for anything except for Brent one time. That was just just kidding. Um,
Well,
but
it's
it's
always a give and take when you're doing that. Yeah,
mhm,
you are making yourself better in one thing. You're probably making yourself worse in several others, and you're
mhm,
not as well rounded. And some of it comes down to the type of character you want to play, but it's dangerous, especially like in a camp, like in a one shot. I
mhm,
think you can make those choices better.
mhm.
In a campaign where what you're doing is all over the board, you're running some risks to run into some complications.
Yep. Well, and the other thing that's kind of I found fascinating is that like when you compare it to a system like D&D, which makes your characters heroic, Cyberpunk naturally gravitates towards the nitty gritty. I mean, you might have grit to like have a character that survives things, but you're just as easily killed given the right set of circumstances. And the game really reinforces that. Like,
Yeah,
okay, well, if you get yourself in a bad situation, it's probably it, man. Like, there's not a, like there's only so many bullets you can take before, you're you're basically put in the trash pile with the rest of them. Um, so it's very important to recognize that you're making a character very interesting, but you should also like
you should.
you should look at it kind of like an OSR style gameplay where it's like, oh, I see this building is heavily secured. I probably shouldn't walk up to it and try to just bust down the front door, or else the sentries and guards and everything are gonna fucking waste me,
Well, yeah,
that kind of thing.
everything is lethal.
Hmm.
You're in a high tech world. If you're just somewhere, you're probably not like, trying to hack building security just to see if you can.
Hmm.
Because the consequences if you get caught are so out of line with whatever you're going to get if you're successful
Hmm.
that it doesn't justify the cost. And the cost may be jail or fines or something bad happening to you, right?
Hmm.
So you got to keep that in mind when you're playing the game. It's
Yeah.
the system is rough on people that stray outside the lines too far.
It can be. But and that could be, but they live on the edge, so it's kind of like, do you do it? Do you not do it? I don't know. Um, so the next thing that I thought was kind of interesting is moving away from character creation tips and kind of talking about just some gameplay tips that were out there. Did you find anything that kind of like in that you thought was an interesting, like, oh, this is how the gameplay kind of plays out, and these are some tips for either a new player or something like that that they could latch onto
Uh,
and know about?
I got some general ones.
Mhm.
I probably spent more time looking at it from the GM's perspective
Okay.
than the players, but some of the call outs that I saw for players were there are consequences to your actions.
Okay.
Uh, you're in a world run by corporations and their security forces and the police, and if you do things that upset those types of people,
Mhm.
they're going to know it.
Yeah.
You're not out there committing the perfect crimes night after night after night after night with nobody noticing.
Yeah.
Um, the consequence thing I saw a lot. Just trying to scan my notes here. Uh, you want to have a good backstory for your character. I think this is a game like a lot of
Mhm.
narrative games where a strong backstory helps you root your character in the reality of the situation
Mhm.
and helps with the role playing.
Yeah.
And the leveling system, I wrapping your head around that as a player, like you said, you're not all of a sudden you're going to be, oh, you're level 10. Like, there's advancements, but they're different than in other games.
Mhm. Yeah, and you get improvement points over time,
Right.
but your stats are fairly static from what I've read. You don't
And
make a lot of changes to your actual stats after
yeah.
character creation, but you do make improvements to your skills after character creation. So you do find you are moving one of the sliders in terms of how you roll things. So,
Yes.
but earning improvement points is based on the type of character you're playing and the types of things you're
Right.
accomplishing. So it is an interesting, like, oh, you want to be kind of the fighter, warrior, combat-y type. Well, these are the kinds of things that can earn you lots of improvement points versus little as you go through a mission or something like that. So
But you're
yeah,
still just as squishy after 100 sessions. The
it's
bullets are
true.
still just as lethal.
Yeah. So that's that living on the edge stuff. You can't out level the bullets, it feels like.
That's
And I kind
true.
of like that about systems, where you don't, like, because I feel that powered measured in D&D comes in the form of like being able to take a hit, and I mean you could get cyberware and stuff like that in this game, but that itself carries risks, cyber psychosis and all
Right.
those things. So there's just a lot going on. I thought, gameplay wise, there were some interesting things to kind of think about, from like just knowing your roles and everything like that. And what I mean, like rolling dice. And so, like for gameplay, from like a stat perspective, like if you're doing a check, you're typically rolling a stat plus a skill plus a d10, versus a difficulty value. And when you roll your dice, there is a chance that they can implode or explode, meaning that if you roll a one, you can go down, which
Right.
always sucks. You can't,
Yeah, that would be awful.
it doesn't infinitely implode, but also you have exploding, meaning if you roll the maximum value on the dice, the 10, it goes up, meaning you can very greatly increase the chance of success. Knowing your difficulty values, though, and this is something I wanted to give a shout out to the community, and B, there's a person, a blogger, a person, um, who's taken the time to really gather a lot of like analysis of the thing, and it's Stackborn. Um, I don't know them personally or anything like that, but
Sure.
their information was, as I was reading it, was very informative for helping digest a huge rule book. Because I mean, you can read the rules and you basically can put a bunch of words in your brain, but the way that they formulated some of their stuff, it was really awesome. So if you're really looking for good resources, go to the subreddit for this Cyberpunk Red, and then also go to this blog that Stackborn has put together that is looks amazing. It has amazing information for it. And here I'm
Nice.
going to talk about some of the things that they had kind of really called out, that I thought was in really good detail, about difficulty values and like understanding just like how well that works. Because first of all, like, as a player, sometimes you don't know how good you are at things or how well you should be. And when you talk about difficult values, you can start low. Like let's say a 9 is simple, is something you can do without thinking. Difficulty value 13 is every day. Most people can do without a lot of special training. 15 is difficult, something most people can do. Most people can do with some special training, but not like a ton. Professional is DV17, heroic is DV21, incredible is DV24, and legendary is DV29, meaning like the most impressive feat you can accomplish. But knowing that, like, if you can get yourself a +1 or +2 in this game, that can tremendously affect your outcome. And so, when you're looking at base skill, like I think we talked about this a little bit in the character creation. A base skill 14 means you're a pro. Like if you have a 14, you're going to you can do things that are DV15 on the regular because that's your stat plus
Right.
your skill, right? So you can do that with relative ease. And then of course base 18 means that you are tremendously good. Now nobody really starts above a base 14 because if my memory serves, you can't get more than an 8 in a skill stat and more than a 6 in a skill. So that's the skill you've chosen to be a pro in. So just to kind of give you an idea as to where you stand, like if your
Sure.
game master is giving you an idea as to a difficulty value, every bonus counts, every little bit. So if you think you get a plus when you're like, that doesn't feel like a lot because you're used to like D&D pluses not really necessarily meaning a lot. +1 in this game means a lot. So thought that was a
Yes.
really, really helpful understanding of how that really went. What other gameplay tips did you run into?
Uh, I don't know that I really had any others here on the list. Yeah, in terms of game tips, I'm not really seeing any others in my list.
Okay. Well, here's one I thought, just to kind of add that to it that I hadn't really considered, is that some of your skills are basically what you would use for saving throws, and others increase your chance to hit or dodge in combat and everything like that. But these are some really interesting and helpful ones to know, like because they could easily be overlooked in the list of skills. Because even when you have the app, if you just scroll through that list of skills, it's pretty long. Like it's
Yeah,
at some point you
no,
get
it's
to your
there's a surprising amount.
you go, okay, well, your brain is just like, well, how many of these assholes do I get? And the answer is not all of them. So knowing that, for example, resist torture and drugs is a skill that allows you to have a saving throw against torture, poison, flashbangs, etc., is an important thing that you may not know right out of the gate because that's buried in the R's. And by then, if you're scrolling alphabetically, that can be pretty far down.
You've already spent all your points.
Yeah, it's pretty far. You have cyber tech, which is kind of your saving throw against EMP. You have your endurance, which is kind of a saving throw against fatigue. Concentration, which is a saving throw against suppressive fire. Evasion, which is your ability to dodge, kind of like your AC. And then you have your brawling, which is kind of like your hand-to-hand ability to escape, disarm actions and stuff like that. I thought that was a really helpful call out because sometimes and I've played in so many games where I've read the rules and it just didn't dawn on me that it's like, oh, there's an evasion skill. I should probably take that skill because then the fight happens inevitably because that's what happens in most intro adventures because they always like to throw combat at new players just to kind of test the waters. And then you're like, well, I'm gonna roll this nice against your evasion, and you're like, I don't have any evasion. Does that mean I just die? Like,
Right.
what
No,
happens here?
I think we've all been in that situation where you find out that skill that you overlooked is somehow kind of crucial to the system,
Mhm.
potentially.
Like a perception skill or an awareness skill or something like that it's usually one of those ones that I found that most people just overlook and they're like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm just gonna wander through life not knowing anything."
Yeah. No, that's a
So
good tip. I like that one.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought that was really helpful to kind of like know it. And I don't know if and I didn't look at all the different pre-generated roles and everything like that, but I don't think every role when you're doing your street runner or your street rat or your edge runner has all of these skills. So you might have to.
Well, I don't think you have enough points really,
Mm-mm.
unless you just want to put one in everything.
Well, but you have those 6 points at the end that you could spend, to kind of like give you
Yeah.
the little bit extra. Um, so that is just your hint. There's something called dodging. Use evasion. so,
There we
um,
go.
yeah. So it's just like little things like that that are really important. Um, so common pitfalls. So did you find? I know we've talked a little bit about pitfalls that people can run into, but one pitfall I wanted to mention that like it seemed like I saw this in a few different places, is that while net running is a cool component of the game, because it's cyberpunk net running, it's
Right.
kind of like it seems like it should be impactful. Most people say that net running can slow the game down, especially since not everyone can typically net run. There's like just one player type. So one of the videos that I saw, they said, well, I don't really when I play con games, I don't pre-generate net runners typically because that is just like a different system. It's not for everybody, and it slows
Right.
down my games. And I found that that advice was echoed that if you wanted like obviously you can have whatever characters your players want to have in there, but in terms of pitfalls that you can run into is that that player can all of a sudden be playing a different game that can kind of slow the action around them a little bit as you resolve their net running stuff.
Ye-
um I guess I've not played to know, but that's just what I was hearing on the street.
Well, we've heard the same thing though about Shadowrun, and I'm not.
Mhm.
They're not the same games. They're
Mhm.
similar concepts, and I know people that won't play Shadowrun if somebody wants to be a net runner, especially if they want to be a net runner that lives in a secure bunker.
Mhm.
Or I know it's not called a net runner, but right in Shadowrun, it's something different, isn't it? Is it still net
Yeah,
runner?
they're like, riggers, there's,
Riggers. There we go.
that's not there's another one, I don't remember the
There
name
is.
of it,
It,
but
yeah,
it's basically the people that get into the system, right?
yeah. Honestly, if I was running a game, I might make it so that they have to be with the party and doing stuff with like mobile equipment, as
Mhm.
opposed to, like I said, being back in a bunker somewhere, separate from the party. It's like having an agoraphobe in your party who can't go outside.
Okay.
I'm not trying to say that that's terrible, and there's technology to overcome some of that, but
Mhm.
sometimes you want the party to be with the party. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It and it's good for spotlight moments. I just, from my own experience, I haven't had a chance to run somebody with a net runner. So I'll be curious to see if on our Wednesday game, if somebody actually chooses that, because I'm going to come with some pre-mades. I'm just going to whip up some pre-made characters for
Sure.
running the thing. And if you guys want to make characters, we can too. But I feel like sometimes with one shots, it's easier to just get a
Grab a pre-gen that speaks to you.
yeah, it speaks to you then, that and if I pre-generate a character and none of them happen to be net runners, it saves me the
So
roll.
if somebody asks and you say, "Oh, this story isn't really
Yeah,
conducive to that part of the gameplay,"
there's no net here.
yeah,
Yeah. No, but I just it's not that I would ever wanna deny somebody the choice of making, especially in campaign play. Like, if you're playing a
right.
campaign, play the character you want. I'll figure it out. But it's just a common thing that people have said that for, like, one shots and maybe getting your game going right out of the gate, net runners can be a little bit that concept can be a little bit challenging,
Yeah,
for the
it
rest of the
probably works better with a group that has played the game, veterans,
Mm,
if you will,
yeah.
as opposed to a group of new people that are all excited with their shiny toy, and
Mhm.
it's probably a little different.
Yeah. So that's really the only pitfall that I found when I was looking around online as to how to run the game and everything like that. I did like from like a gaming, like some just general GM advice and everything like that. There is talk a lot about how like the city is living. Um, like that how do you make the city living? I did have somebody put down 3 questions, and I don't remember what their name was or their username, but it was just like, when you do stuff in your sessions and everything like that, you ask these kinds of questions. These aren't an exhaustive list, but this is 4 good questions that they had to say, like, okay,
Okay.
well, how does what they did impact Night City? How does this change the party's situation, positive or negative or neutral? Who did the party piss off? Are there other groups involved that you could have made angry by stopping that, shipment or hijacking it or anything like that? And of course, who did your party make friends with? That is, so those were 4 questions that as a GM running the game, I thought that was a nice thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind, that when you finish up a session, go, okay, well, did they make enemies? Did they make friends?
Yeah.
How did they change the world around them? How do you keep the city changing with your players who are having an impact, even if it's just at the street level?
No, I like that. The setting in this game seems like it's a character
Mhm.
almost. And so those are excellent questions. I just don't have a lot to add.
No, I thought they were good questions
That's really
myself.
good, actually.
Yeah.
Because there are again, there are consequences.
Hmm.
You did an action, you did something, and things are going to happen because of that.
Yeah. But I think it's just a good set of questions to ask, and maybe that falls under general advice, but just happens to be focused towards Cyberpunk Red. You of course could ask similar questions for your D&D games or whatever you want to say, but
Oh yeah,
I thought it was a good reminder to be like, okay, well, how do you make the world alive around them? These are some good questions to ask.
no,
Um,
those are, and it will create a more dynamic environment.
mhm. Yep. The next one I found was that there were some focused reading that were recommended by Stackmore, and as well as I saw in other places,
Really?
which is one of those things where sometimes when somebody has really good advice, other people recycle that advice, and so you're like, oh, I saw it in 12 places, and it's just that one piece of advice is so good that everyone's just telling everybody. But in the book, there are 3 sections to read. It is like running Cyberpunk, a Cyberpunk masterclass, and beat charts, and those 3 sections help you kind of like you wrap your brain around how to run the game really well, including the fact that as the GM, it's kind of your responsibility to in your descriptions and everything like that, set the tone, the style, the feel of the game right out of the gate. So I hope that when we play on Monday and we have our mission that we go on, I hope I can do it justice, because I feel like I'm now kind of like intimidated by all the stuff that I've read about Cyberpunk, and I'm like, oh, I hope I run a cool Cyberpunk game, and everyone's like, that's not a Cyberpunk game. You didn't know. Damn, we'll see. And then of course, for golden rules, style over substance, attitude is everything, and live on the edge. Like, make sure you're incorporating that mentality into your gameplay. So, but past that, I don't know. I mean, there's obviously a lot of little tiny rules here and there, but did you have any other rules that kind of came out that you
Uh,
saw?
Relative to other games, the combat in this system should be very fast.
Hmm.
Most of the advice I saw was expect combat to last 3 to 5 rounds,
Okay.
which is about 10 seconds of game time.
Yeah.
It,
And if
these
you're
aren't
lucky,
big extended combats. You're you're fighting enemies
mhm,
that probably aren't going to hang around if they're obviously going to lose. They're
yeah.
probably going to surrender. They're probably going to run. They're probably not going to fight to the last man.
Hmm.
Guns are very lethal.
Yeah.
If your party gets caught unaware, you're probably not going to make the decisions to just go down in a blaze of glory.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's very different. Like, especially coming from D&D, where I've had 45-minute combats, man.
Yeah. Well, and I suspect that in the beginning, when everybody's still learning the rules, nothing is fast. Like, you just
Right.
have to assume that a as a new game master, new player, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget a rule. You're going to forget a part of your character. Whatever. Move on, fix it, learn from it. Right. Don't hold yourself over the fire for it. But also know that
Exactly.
nobody in the first game ever really has a, especially if you're all new to it, because we're all going to be new to this. Like nobody has a perfect session right out of the gate. You can try to prepare, but you're going to forget things. And I think that it's like, so even though we're saying combat is fast, if we have a combat in our game and it goes slow, it's just because we're new, we're getting used to it. But veterans can
Sure.
roll that shit out fast, I guess, right?
Yes.
So
No,
uh,
I think they can. You know.
mhm. Yeah. And something I thought was interesting is that it feels like, as some of the advice I got for GMs, one last piece that I was going to throw out there is that, like, if the player comes up with an idea, like a lot of times the rules are going to accommodate for making that happen. And you know what? They say let the players break the game if they can a little bit. Allow the characters to have that moment, because I mean, certain cyberware and choices that they make can let them be a little superhuman if they earn it, right? So when you start getting
Yes.
cyberware, I mean, you're fucking, you have bullet time and shit like that. So it's like, I
There's some
mean,
crazy abilities in this game.
yeah,
There are bullet time is nuts, right? Like it's
yeah,
nuts. It's world altering.
exactly. So don't be afraid to allow it, but also set your scale up to be like, okay, well, if they can do this, like, I mean, obviously I can't just introduce Atom Smasher. That's the only character that I know from Cyberpunk. The what Arasaka, like super badass
Yeah, yeah,
cyborg
yeah,
guy.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
can't. He can't be the problem. He can't be the solution to every one of the DM's problems with players, but you can
No,
definitely
but
have a.
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, but you have a lot of ways in which, even if a player has a lot of chrome, obviously, that doesn't mean they're invincible. It just means that they're right on the edge, and it's
No,
only
they're
a.
right. They're right on the edge, and there's a lot of things. Some of the advice I saw, let the players do their thing, but again, remind them that there's consequences. Like
Mhm.
when you steal a bunch of guns and tech, or you loot it from a fight, and then you carry it all to get it away. If you do that and you're going to try to sell it, do you have a place to store it? Word gets out on the street when you see four people hustling stuff into a storage unit and then
Mhm.
locking it. You come back the next morning, stuff may not be there. Um, I did see a lot of advice to use clocks, or some people even stole fronts from Dungeon World. They
Okay.
operate, my understanding is, almost identical to clocks, which we've used in other games.
Hmm.
But you keep you keep the pressure on the party,
Yeah.
uh, reinforce that paranoia that exists in the setting,
Hmm.
right? Because there's always somebody watching you, Mike. There's always somebody watching you.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can do that somebody isn't aware of.
It's true. It's true. So yeah, that's. I mean, it's definitely some good advice. So I think with that, I think we can wrap up and say we're as ready as we can be to play Cyberpunk Red. I mean, as much as we can, and
Yeah.
then hopefully hopefully we enjoy the heck out of the two adventures we get. We'll see, and then I can of course check one of my games off my bucket list.
I
I feel like this is as good as one of, like, getting a game out of your Steam library, playing it and beating it. When you have a pile of shame in the background, you're like, I just got to
right.
play this game. Like, everyone says to play it. I haven't played it. I want to play it. Let's just do it.
No, yeah, I'm excited to play. I This has been one that's been sort of just, like, just off the radar. Like,
Mhm.
I've known about it and it's kind of in my wheelhouse. So I've always wanted to play it, but it's never like been the next thing that I wanted to play, if that makes sense.
It
But
is.
we
It
finally get
does.
to play it, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Let's
I
do
think
it.
it's going to be fun.
Alrighty. So with that, that's kind of the end of the show. I think it was fun. Hopefully everybody enjoyed hearing what we found on the internet to help your first time playing, or even if you played Cyberpunk Red and you're just looking for extra tips. I mean, none of these say you have to be a first time GM to benefit from them. But we
Yeah.
enjoyed it. We've enjoyed researching it. I think we're getting really excited to play our couple games. And so if you like this kind of conversation, again, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, comment. Let us know how your games go in Cyberpunk Red, or if you want to see us play another game, let us know. But Jeff, where do they find us on social media if they're looking outside
They
of
can
YouTube?
find us on Blue Sky. We're at rollwise.bsky.social. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, we're just at rollwise. And you can email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
All right. And always remember, because Brent does this part, I'm going to try to channel him. Remember, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there. So, see everybody.
Thanks.